Hello, everybody. Welcome to my channel. My name is Pop Culture Curator, and this week I'm going to be covering a Hollywood legend makeup. I would consider a genius or a master, one of the originals, dating back to the silent era. I don't have a lot of information on this person. Unfortunately, it's long. Unfortunately, a lot of it has been lost. The person I speak of is the reason why you're probably tuning into this channel is I'll be covering Lon Chaney Sr. today. I know some of you may be thinking, oh, the guy that played the Wolfman, but that was actually Lon Chaney Jr., the actor. Lon Chaney Sr. that I'll be covering is his father, who was also an actor as well as one of the original Hollywood makeup legends. I'll be covering a few clips. I don't have a lot of moving footage of him. I have some samples, and I'll show some pictures of some of the work that he's done. I'll lightly touch on who the man is and where he's from. I'm not going to go into heavy detail about his biography, parents, lineage, and all that. There's other channels out there for that. And I hope this piques your interest where you'll go out there and search for them. I highly recommend them. The life of this person is extremely fascinating. But today I'll be covering on mostly the makeup aspects, which is what my channel is going to focus on in the next upcoming weeks. Each week I'm hoping to cover a different makeup master. So I thought today, since this is my first stream covering individual makeup masters, I wanted to start with the original, if not one of the originals, who was legendary, who was still remembered. A lot of people, newer generations may not remember him, but once you start seeing imagery of him and some of the things that he's done, you may recognize it. If not, then I hope, like I said, I hope it piques your interest where you'll seek out and find some of these things. A lot of his work has been lost to time because there were silent movies back then, and a lot of movies did not survive till now. Some did. Some of his movies are available on YouTube, and I'll highlight some of those and bring them up. Words and pictures. Hello, welcome. Thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it. Oh, I'm going to post. Bear with me here, everyone. I'm going to post a link at the top of the chat. So if you'd like, you can join me. I would really appreciate it. Anybody up here to give me someone to talk to would be wonderful. And I need to also post a link. Let me post the StreamYard link first here. I'll do that. So bear with me here. I'm a little slow sometimes, guys. I can do it within here. Oh, and by the way, at any time, if you have anything you want to suggest or argue, please feel free to do it. This is an open forum, and I enjoy other people's opinions. Resolute Germ, hello. So good to see you, Resolute Germ. Thank you for joining. Some of these people, including Resolute Germ, I know has their own channels out there who produce content. So at any time, if you want to, I'm programming my StreamYard's Element bot. I don't know if it's working yet or not. Let me try. Oh, LDG, welcome LDG. Thank you for joining. I really appreciate it. I'll be covering Lon Chaney, the Hollywood makeup guy. He's from, the guy was born in the 1800s, and he died. Unfortunately, back then, a lot of people smoked heavily, and he was definitely not an exception. He was a chain smoker. Cigarettes didn't even have filters back then. So he died at a relatively early age, not only from smoking, but in one of his last movies, The Thunder, he accidentally breathed in fake snow. Back then, when they manufactured fake snow for the movies, they made them out of asbestos, unfortunately. And he had a piece lodge into his throat, which caused a throat hemorrhage, and he eventually passed away from it, sadly speaking. Resolute Germs still lurking and driving. I completely understand. That's usually how I am when I'm enjoying one of your channels that are on there. Usually, a lot of times, I'll be working and driving, but I love to listen from the chat. And like I said, I did pin a link at the top there if anybody wants to join me in the panel. Even if you feel you don't have anything to offer, it's like Imagine it's just like a chat room. We're just sitting around. You can always come up. You do not have to know anything about Hollywood or makeup or any of that stuff. Everyone's encouraged. There's no misgivings. I'm not an expert by any means of Hollywood makeup. I have not done it myself. I'm just a fan, and all I can do is share with you what I know. I don't know everything, and what I tell you may not be perfect. If somebody has a correction for me, please feel free to bring it up. I'll do the best I can to try to keep it accurate, which is why I won't be too specific, like on dates and things like that. I don't want to make mistakes, but I encourage you and anyone out there that if you do feel interested after the stream, not during, not but after the stream, if you want to look up the life, the history, and the work of this genius, I highly recommend it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get into showing some of the material of the man. And then I'm still a little new at StreamYards here, guys, so bear with me as I always say. And I'll try to get moving and hustling faster. I'm going to be sharing things as I talk about them lightly. I'm going to show you first a picture of Lon Chaney as a child. He was born in the 1800s, like I said, so relatively a while ago. And this is Lon Chaney Sr. as a child. He's the one on the right. And as you can see, this is a very old photograph. So photographs have came a long way. And by the way, I want to address something. In case any of you are wondering, people wonder why when people posed for photographs back in the old days, 1800s, and things like that, why they don't smile, why they look like this. And you would think that they were grumpy or they were sad or they were depressed. They weren't actually. The thing is that now we're used to when photographs are taken, and for example, somebody says cheese, when the shutter flips on the camera, it's instantaneous and it snaps the picture. So everybody can pose, and they can smile, they can do their selfie, snap, and the picture is taken. Back then, they didn't have that. They didn't have that luxury. The film was so primitive back then. It took a lot of light and time for the frame to expose. So when the subject was posing for the camera, they had to pose for several seconds for the film or for the picture. So if they tried to smile or any movement, there's a really good chance that it would come up blurry because the frame would, instead of click and it would take a frame, the frame would open, it would expose to light, and like I said, sometimes for seconds, and then it would close, and then they were able to move. So that's the reason why it looks like people are in these old photos literally fairly rigid, but not by design. Oh, it's actually by design, not by choice. Okay. And by the way, like I said, if you have any to throw in the comments here, I'll try to pay attention to everyone in the chat as best as I can. And I'm going to try to shout you out. Everybody has their own channels. I know Resolute Germ has a wonderful channel. Please check out LDG's channel. I programmed my Stream Elements bot, I think. I don't know if it's working. I'm going to try it. Let me try it on LDG first. And of course, no, it's not. See, that's what I get for trying it for the first time. So bear with me, you guys. You're my test subjects. Maybe it did work. I think it was just delayed a bit. Yes, it did. All right. I'm really happy. So that means I can. There we go. I'm going to start putting everyone's channels as you come in because I really appreciate it. And this is the way I can advertise for you. Let's see if that works. Yeah, this is perfect. I'm happy now. Got a little help this time. Makes it a little easier for me. Okay. So back to Lon Chaney. Lon Chaney started in pantomime because this was before movies were created. So even when movies were created, they didn't have sound until 1926. And Chaney started working as a child in the early 1900s. So he was born, by the way, to deaf parents. Both his mother and his father were deaf, was not able to hear at all. So he had to entertain himself a lot. And he started learning how similar, it kind of reminds me more modern day of Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey is known, if you look up where he's talking about his history as a kid, is he had many hours where he would just sit in front of or stand in front of a mirror and make faces and make characters. And I saw one of Jim Carrey's early stand-up routines at a Star Trek convention before he hit it famous, where he was doing his impersonations and impressions, and he was very funny. He can distort his face and mimic a lot of people. So if you ever see Jim Carrey do any of his old classic stand-up routines, I highly recommend it. And I'll show you. I'm going to show you an example here of Lon Chaney at an earlier date here, playing with his face. This is somewhat of an example. You can see from left to right. I know this is the year 2022. So a lot of people are saying, big deal, we've all done this, been there and done that, we can all do this. But please bear in mind, a lot of this was the early 1900s. So I know making faces, yeah, everybody's been doing that for centuries. But when I start touching on some of the makeup and things like that, please remember the originality. Back then, they didn't have all everything, the support and everything we have now and the technology on Hollywood makeup. In fact, back in the early days of the silent movies, when Lon Chaney was around, many, many times, actors had to wear their own costumes and their own makeup. So actors and actresses would have to, at home, make themselves up. Sometimes when, eventually they got bigger, they would have like a little, like a office or a studio or whatever on the stage, the sound stage of the lot. But they originally had to do their own makeup. So if they play a bad guy or a good guy or whatever character, they had to bring their own makeup to the studio and dress it up. And that's where Lon Chaney really shined. People started noticing that he was more flexible and he had a lot more designs than most people. He seemed to have a great variety, I guess would be the word. And what he did was he created a kit, similar to like you see in the old days where a doctor would carry around this kit, black bag, and they would open it up and they'd have all these doctor's tools and things like that they would pull out. He had something similar back then that he would carry around with him. And when the director would say, this is the kind of character we need, this is what we want, Lon Chaney would pull out his kit and then he would immediately create it. There's a picture here of Lon Chaney with his kit. Sorry about the spoiler, everybody. That's Lon Chaney partially wearing his Phantom of the Opera makeup, which made him famous. I'll touch on that here, in fact. But that's what I wanted to highlight was that kit that you can see. If I can zoom in. I don't know if that helps you guys zoom in or not. But that was Lon Chaney's famous kit. And when he passed away, it went to his son, Lon Chaney Jr., the actor who played the Wolfman and some other things in Hollywood. And then once Lon Chaney Jr. passed away, which is the 1960s, this kit was put into a museum. So this kit does still exist, but it is now preserved for hopefully a very long time. One of these days, I hope I can get a close look at it and see what's inside. By the way, the kit and the equipment he didn't have the sophisticated latex and collodion and all the things that we have now. A lot of time what they used back then was putty and other things until they refined the craft. And here's a little picture that some of these pictures may be out of sequence as far as time, which I apologize for, but I'll try to keep them as close as possible together. Here is Lon Chaney Sr. as a teenager. And that's a fairly clear picture there. So this is when he was first getting into work. When he was first getting into work, movies really hadn't either been invented or just getting started. This is when Thomas Edison was just inventing film. So when Lon Chaney first originally started, he did a lot of theater work on the stage and pantomime, which a lot of you, I'm sure you know what pantomime is, where the actor moves and kind of over moves and reacts in front of an audience without making a sound, because at the time they had no sound. So he basically went from stage acting and pantomime to silent movies when movies and film was invented, sound came out in 1926. He was able to make one sound movie before he passed away. So there's only one that exists, which I'll touch on that lightly as well. But I know we're here to see the makeup, so we'll get into that. Here is a famous clip here from a lost movie. There's very little footage that survives. But this is a scene where huckster, or well, they call them hucksters, but people who posed as priests and preachers at churches were claiming to cure people. So they had actors pose with various illnesses and problems in order to fake like they're being healed. So in this famous scene here, we're going to see Lon Chaney as a crippled man. Everything you see here is Lon Chaney himself. There's no practical effects, by the way. It's strictly him contorting his body. I'll try to get this so you can see the whole thing, but it's not cut off. So this is Lon Chaney here as a crippled man. And there's a famous scene. By the way, this movie, these clips from this movie are available on YouTube. You can see where he's dragging himself up to the preacher. There's like a few seconds surviving footage. And the preacher supposedly blesses him. And he slowly starts straightening out his body little by little and then standing up. And then he stands up and says that he's cured. This plot later was basically redone in a movie called Elmer Gantry with Burt Lancaster. Lon Chaney went on to create another role, which basically went down to legend as well and made him very famous, which I'll cover now. And this is Lon Chaney in The Hunchback of Notre Dame. This is the original Hunchback of Notre Dame. That's him with his makeup that he did himself. Remember, this is the Hunchback. The story has been told in film, movies, and cartoons several times over the years. But this was the very first depiction of the Hunchback of Notre Dame on film. I know it doesn't quite look like the Disney version, but a real story is not a Disney version. It's a very sad and tragic tale. And he did, by the way, when Lon Chaney made up his face for the Hunchback, he did his entire body. So I want to make sure that I cover and show exactly how much effort he put into this character and what made him so famous and the reason why he was so renowned at the time. That is Lon Chaney tied to the concrete wheel or chained to the wheel in the movie. By the way, this movie, the original Hunchback of Notre Dame, should be available on YouTube as well if anybody wants to check it out. It is a silent movie. Please be patient. I know a lot of people are not used to watching silent movies with text, but if you give them a chance, there's a whole beautiful, wonderful world of movies out there in the silent era. They have horror, they have romance, drama, suspense, comedy. Those movies that have survived are usually the top ones, the most famous ones. Lesser known movies are the ones that tended not to survive. Unfortunately, back in the day in Hollywood, they would take a lot of movies after they were shown at the theater. They would take the films and actually bury them. In LA and around that area, they would use them to place swimming pools. When they knew they were going to build an in-ground swimming pool, they would dig the hole, throw a bunch of film in there. They'd take it out of the reels, throw a bunch of film in there, film nitrate, and then just place the pool on top of it. Unfortunately, a lot of many great films were lost to time because of things like this. Sometimes they will find lost films that we have believed lost for all these years. They'll eventually discover in somebody's attic, or somebody passes away and somebody goes through grandma's stuff, and they'll find original copies of some movies that we have all thought lost over the years. A perfect example is the wonderful sci-fi film Metropolis from 1926. It was butchered so many times over the years that we all originally thought that the original unedited version was lost to time. But just in the last few years, they found a missing reel that had been missing for literally decades. and they were able to piece the movie back together into almost a complete version. So it's really nice. They have a list of movies on this list, and people are out there searching for them. And when they come to light, they're able to restore them. Sorry to get off on the tangent there. And that's the Hunchback there. And I want to get one more shot of the Hunchback just to show. I really love the detail. And by the way, I'm sure you can tell by looking at this, since this was not modern day filmmaking. They didn't have the luxury of air conditioning and studio lights, a lot of that. So here in this shot, you will see that this is Lon Chaney resting between takes, and the suit was very hot. This was filmed on an exterior, and if you look behind him to the right, you will see mirrors on the ground that are set at an angle, and those are set to reflect light onto the buildings in the background. Because the fact that the film back then took so much light to expose, and they just didn't have the lighting like they do now. They couldn't just have low lighting and then set the exposure on the film to see it. It just wasn't that possible. So a lot of times for exterior filming, they would have to use mirrors to reflect, which would only boost the heat, by the way, because those mirrors are reflecting the sunlight. And here is a scene of Lon Chaney as a clown, the man who was slapped, where he plays different clown characters. So I'll rush through some of these here. I know we've all seen clowns before, but he seemed to be really good at them. And he did more than one in that movie. And there he is again. Lon Chaney made a movie in the late, I believe it was 1927, and you get the exact year, but it's called London After Midnight, where he played an investigator, and he was solving a crime, and in the movie, they wanted him to dress as a vampire. So what I'm about to show you, it will be one of the first movie vampires shown. Now, in the movie, he was not playing a vampire. In the movie, he dressed up as a ruse to solve a murder. But we've all seen, or some of you may have seen the original Nosferatu, the vampire movie from Germany starring Max Schreck. And he was the actual vampire put on film first with Max Schreck. This would be the second appearance of a vampire before Bela Lugosi's Dracula. I apologize for the delay. I need a faster computer. Maybe one of these days I can raise enough money. Okay. And this is Lon Chaney as a vampire. And the reason why I wanted to highlight this is if you'll notice that his eyes and his mouth are not normal. Okay. What Lon Chaney would do whatever it would take to get the look that he wanted. So, as an example for this, he actually had wires in his eyes. He made rings, kind of like rings, and he put them around the area of the outside of his eyes to pull the skin back and to give the effect of the eyes looking like they do with no eyelids, I guess, pretty much. And the mouth, you'll notice the mouth is not normal, and that's not makeup either. What he actually did is he took he made a wire structure, put it in his mouth, and conformed his mouth around it. So those are his actual lips with a device in his mouth to hold them in that position. And plus, he also had, of course, he had fake teeth here for this scene. This is from London After Midnight. Unfortunately, this is one of the movies I spoke about, which is lost. There is no surviving footage that we know of. This movie is considered the #1 lost film that everyone is searching for. So if you ever look up lost films, you're going to find this one at the top. Remember, this is 1920s, mid 1920s, 26. So remember, it's not the technology of it is today. So bear with me on some of this. I will be covering makeup artists from different eras. So you'll see newer, more sophisticated things as we go further. That's him in full costume there as the vampire. And I know it looks like cosplay, and a lot of people are saying, well, I could do that. I could do that at the next Halloween party. But I want you to focus on what he did with his face. Yes, the suit, the wings, all that. Of course, we could all do that. But what he did with his face, with the wires, it was unheard of at the time. In fact, if any of you have seen Tim Burton's version of Batman with Jack Nicholson as the Joker, Jack Nicholson was a huge fan of Lon Chaney. And that's how they were able to achieve that grin on the Joker's face. Is just like Lon Chaney, they put a wire framework inside the mouth, so they gave him that big extended grin, which is not normal, but without having to add a fake mouth. So that way you have the realistic look, but it stays in position. And like I said, if anybody in the chat there, I know there's people watching. If you guys have anything you want to throw in, oh, Gorilla Random, you're welcome. If there's anything anybody wants to add, please feel free to. This is going to be a short stream because, like I said, I don't have a lot of footage on him because a lot of things were lost to time, which is really, really sad. But we're hoping like everything will be found. If you go to Internet Movie Database and you look up his history, you'll see a list of all the things that he has done and created. I'm going to show you Lon Chaney as a one-armed man here. In fact, I was able to find this movie, and I watched it just the other day, the entire movie. I was very happy to see it. Now, what I want to point out is what you're seeing here is Lon Chaney as a one-armed man. But within the movie, he's in a traveling circus, by the way. And that's him on the right. But actually, he's no arms. I apologize, no arms. In fact, in the movie, they show him riding with his toes. He sits down and he rides with his toes. So he has no arms in the scene. And he achieved that effect himself. These days, usually when they show actors with no arms, of course, they use CGI. They'll put green socks on their arms to hide them. Before that, the actors usually put the arms behind their back. And for any astute watchers out there that have watched the older stuff, when they show somebody with a missing arm or both arms, they tend to just have them tucked in the back, and the camera would conveniently not show the back. It would only show them from the front, and so forth and so forth. In this one, he plays a con artist in this movie, working at a circus, and he's trying to basically cheat the owner of the circus. And he's also in love with the woman on the left. But even at this point, she does not know that he has arms. So he has his two arms. I'm going to explain it. I don't consider this a spoiler because the movie is almost 100 years old. Actually, it's over 100 years old. So please apologize for any broken hearts out there for the spoiler. But his hands are in front of him, which they don't tend to do now. Here, I'll show it a little smaller. His hands are actually in front of him, down towards his waist. I guess they'll show it. There's a scene in the movie where he unravels and takes off the clothing. But what's great is right now he's wearing that jacket with no arms. And in the movie, the jacket is taken off him, and you still cannot tell. The illusion is still there. So he did a really, really good job at strapping his arms really tight to his body to not give it the effect. And that way you could see him from all angles, and it did not look like he had his arms hidden, which was a pretty great feat. They could do it now if they wanted to, but they won't. Today they'll just use CGI. Okay, and I want to show you one of the most famous poses of all because I wanted to harken back to this. I showed you Lon Chaney's makeup kit. Now, what I'm going to show now is his breakout role that made him a legend, and that is when he played the original Phantom of the Opera. And here we are. Here's Lon Chaney as the Phantom of the Opera. Here is full makeup. When I showed you the makeup kit earlier, like I said, it was partial makeup. For this makeup here, he taped his ears back. He had tape behind them to tape them back to look like they were disfigured from a fire or missing. His nose is also taped. He has his nose taped, covered under makeup with tape to show that up in the up position where it kind of looks like a pug nose, because he is supposed to, the character has supposedly been through a fire. So using his own makeup kit, like I said, which was primitive at the time, he basically taped his ears back. He taped his nose up to give it the look that it does. And he also had a wire frame around his lips to extend his mouth and make it older, make it look like it had no lips. So he wanted the effect of no lips, as if they'd been burned off in a fire. And a little bit of history I wanted to bring up that's unheard of these days. When this movie came out, they refused to show his face in the trailer because at this point, audience has never seen anything like this. So a lot of the hype around the movie was that he hid his face. He wouldn't allow any publicity photos or stills or anything. You had to go to the movie to see the reveal. It was a reveal. There's a famous scene where he reveals it. And when that happened, women were crying, vomiting. I'm not exaggerating. They said children, I don't know why they would have taken children in there. It was a romantic love story, so maybe that's the reason. But they said women were crying, children were bawling, and that men were going outside for fresh air. So I know now we're looking back at this and say, "Oh, I've seen, that's simple. That could be done easily." But back then, in 1922 or 23, when this was done, this was unheard of, and like I said, it shocked it. It shocked audiences. Made a lot of money, a lot of repeat money back then. Of course, now Hollywood studios have entire makeup departments. Just watch any Marvel movie or any other movie. At the end of the credits, when it shows makeup, and you'll see hundreds of names listing by, especially for CGI, hair, makeup, everything like that. Lon Chaney, remember, he did everything himself. The clothing, the makeup, the hair, everything was done by this one man, and the acting. Eventually, they, of course, formed unions. And right now, an actor or actress doing their own makeup for a TV show or movie is unheard of. And I'm going to give you one look at the man, looking not so crazy, because he was a regular person like the rest of us. He did not look like a strange person. So here we go. This is Lon Chaney Sr. as he normally looked. This was his publicity photo. So if you want to get an autograph, this is the one you get. And like I said, this is back in the day where smoking was glamorous. Everyone did it. And as you can see, the cigarette unfortunately has no filter. Nobody smoked with filters back then, so it pretty much had the best of them. And it, that's why the lifespans were shorter back then. So kids, if you smoke cigarettes, give them up, or at least get a filter. No offense to smokers out there, by the way. I used to smoke too, and I'm so glad I quit. But we've lost a lot of good people from that, including my parents. All right. I believe we're close to the end of this. Like I said, it was going to be a relatively short one. These next streams will be a little longer because they'll be more current, and it'll be more, newer movies with people that had more work. It'll be more current with, newer people that I'll be touching on later in the future, and those streams will be perhaps an hour or more. I know this one's maybe 35 minutes, 40 minutes, but I wanted to end it on. I have a little bit of highlight reel here of Lon Chaney and some of his work. Now, of course, it does not show everything, and it's a few seconds long, but I do want to share this with you so you can kind of get an idea of who he was without looking at a bunch of still pictures. So I'm going to share that with us before we close out. that is that. Now, if I could just stop sharing that screen. All right. Okay, there we go. All right. That was a little bit of a film clip there, and it just barely touches on the career and some of the work that he's done. And I think that's all that I have for today. I really appreciate everyone and anyone who has joined me for this stream. I'm still new with my channel, so every person here, it means a lot to me, you guys being here for the support. And the next streams that I have, like I said, will be more modern and a lot of things you guys recognize. We'll be showing more modern werewolf movies and things like that, E.T. and stuff like that. So I wanted to thank you all for joining me. I really appreciate it. You guys are a wonderful audience. Thank you for not cussing me out. Just kidding. But I will see you all in the near future, and I'll be on Anti-Derivative Jill's chat here tomorrow on her channel. We're doing our Orville review, and I'll have my Ray Bradbury Watch Theater tomorrow afternoon. And I hope you can tune next week for my next Masters of Hollywood makeup show. Until then, bless you, everybody, and thank you. Oops.